Conservatives Fund, a member-led state political action committee dedicated to advancing the conservative movement and electing true conservative candidates. Because UCF was established as more than just a PAC, Senator McDaniel will discuss how UCF can recruit and prepare candidates, coordinate and motivate conservative grassroots, as well as provide funds and support. I would like to introduce Senator Chris McDaniel.
Thank you very much for that kind welcome. I'm sorry I'm running late. I think every liberal from the city of Austin was on Interstate 35. They were trying to block me from getting there. I don't think they like it with conservatives getting one room together. I think it scares them a bit from time to time. It is an honor to be here. I love Texas. My heart has always been in Texas. Before I was a senator, I worked out here a lot. I jumped between San Antonio and Houston and Dallas in my practice. So I love the state, love the people. One of the best things about Texas, and I was noticing this on the drive up, you understand the significance of state sovereignty and what it means. It's as if on every car dealership and every restaurant, there's the state flag of Texas. It means something to be a Texan, and it should mean something to be a Texan. All the powers not delegated to that federal government belong right here in Texas for you all to govern your state as you see fit. That's the nature of freedom. It's the nature of liberty. I wish Mississippians had that same quest and pride in their state as Texas does. And we say we do, and I think some certainly do, but oftentimes we find ourselves, it seems, almost ashamed. And we shouldn't be ashamed to be proud of who we are, should we? No. Ever. And before I start, I want to share something with you, and I almost never read anything in a speech, but it's something I want to share because it means so much to where we are as a movement, where we're going as a movement, and why I'm here. Consider this quote for a second. Now listen to the words very carefully because they come from a very unusual source, at least for conservatives, but it's something to be said. The true democracy, living and growing and inspiring, puts its faith in the people. Faith that the people will not simply elect men who will represent their views ably and faithfully, but will also elect those who will exercise their conscientious judgment. Listen to this. Faith that the people will not condemn those whose devotion to principle leads them to unpopular courses, but will reward courage, respect honor, and recognize right. Listen to those last few words. It kind of sums up everything we're doing right now. Faith that the people will not condemn those whose devotion to principle leads to unpopular courses, but rewards courage, respects honor, and ultimately recognizes right. See, many people believe that the course that you're on, the course that I'm on, is an unpopular course. And indeed, to many it is. But that doesn't mean we stop. It means we fight. It doesn't mean we surrender in the face of adversity. It means we storm ahead confidently and strongly, as Texans should. We're fighting for the survival of the republic. I believe that. I think you believe that as well, or you wouldn't be sitting here tonight. So many of our people are not paying attention. They're apathetic. It's as if they've become way too busy and the future of this country doesn't seem to matter. Oh, sure, they wake up occasionally and they point a finger at the TV and they vote every so often. But it takes more than that to save a country. It takes an engaged citizenry. That's why you're here. And not a moment too soon, there are millions of people just like you that feel like strangers in this country. Thousands of Mississippians, thousands of people in the South, even California, Massachusetts. People that look around and they think, what happened to the country we inherited? It seems to have become two countries, doesn't it? Two people. An older America is passing away, a new America rising to take its place. And there are those of us in the conservative movement that see this new culture rising, and we recoil from it. Initially, because of our social concerns, we recoil because that culture doesn't seem to share our Christian values. And we shake our head and wonder, what's happening? We feel alienated, we feel isolated. The old holidays we used to celebrate are now criticized and ostracized. The old symbols of the American Revolution thrown aside as being antiquated or even radical, have you noticed? Even the books that you grew up reading in your libraries are being replaced with books and authors you have nothing in common with. It is a cultural revolution from within. And it's changing the way we view our country and our role of our government in our lives. It has to stop. But it takes warriors to make it stop. Consider this for a moment. I believe that we are engaged in a great battle of opposing visions right now. It's that vision that Jefferson had versus the one that Obama perhaps now has. A vision on one hand of individual liberty, morality, and responsible citizenship versus a collectivist idea that we're all beholden to group politics. You say, well, how far have we fallen? A long, long way. Consider this for a moment. A handful of things for conservatives to consider. Benjamin Franklin was not considered a radical in his time. Most of our founders were not considered radicals in their time. A handful, perhaps. Listen to this quote. Any people that would give up liberty for a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. Well, that's radicalism, isn't it? At least in today's language. It's Benjamin Franklin, one of the founders of our country. We look at that quote now and we recoil from it. Wow, what did he mean? He goes, you mean I don't get safety if I don't obey the government, perhaps? If I don't fall for the collective? If I don't need their protection? And he was saying that's okay. Better to have liberty. Now consider that thought for a second. These are men that knew what liberty was. They fought for it. They died for it. They laid their whole lives on the line for it. They knew what it was like to live under tyranny, didn't they? And they were so afraid of that tyranny returning that they would sacrifice their safety for that liberty they wanted so badly. Listen to this one. The Constitution is not an instrument for the government to restrain the people. It is an instrument for the people to restrain the government. Patrick Henry. Oh, this is my favorite. We base all of our experiments on the capacity of mankind for self-government. James Madison, the father of our Constitution. Now the left sees that quote and it really scares them. They would consider that radical, would they not? Dangerous, would they not? Too individualist. They don't care for those types of thoughts. They don't like people who think on their own. But James Madison thought this was all about the capacity of self-government. And perhaps even a better one, Thomas Jefferson, my favorite founder. Resistance to tyrants is obedience to God. Oh. Yes. That's right. That's a man who understood tyranny.
Oh, but he wasn't religious to hear them talk.
We'll get to that in a second.
Thank you.
We'll get to that in a second. You know, he understood religion. He understood tyranny. He understood what it meant to be free. And he fought for it. But in our time, and this is it, the great delusion of my generation and the one that preceded mine was simply this. A politician comes into a room just like this one. He raises his hand. He identifies a problem. And then he tells you that the only way to solve the problem is with government. The greatest illusion of our time. And we fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. And in so doing, we abandoned the American Revolution. We muffled the shot heard around the world. Because for a short time, collectively speaking, historically speaking, in our nation's history, a handful of our generations begin to think that surely enough, a handful of elite human beings in Washington, D.C. could govern our lives better than we can govern the lives ourselves. It's that monarchical impulse, the same thing we've always fought against. Whether it's Reagan or Jefferson, there's always that question of who should really be calling the shots. Is it your life, your community's life, your family's life, or is it Harry Reid's life? It's really that simple from the mind of a Mississippian, a Scotch-Irishman whose families have been fighting centralization of authority for hundreds of years. We see it for what it is. As government grows, liberty retracts. And your liberty, as Jefferson would say, is worth your obedience to God and your willingness to stand up to power when it threatens your liberty. My situation in Mississippi is very unique. I'm a state senator. I've been a part of the Republican Party my entire life. I became a Republican when Ronald Reagan was in office. Now, I was just a little boy, didn't know anything about politics or philosophy, but my father called me to the room and he goes, "Hey son, you've got to look at this guy. He's saying things that make sense to me." My father was a professor. Don't hold that against me. And we were watching Ronald Reagan speak on TV, and we watched this man, and he looked like he was talking right to us. He was talking to an entire country, but it looked like he was talking just to us. And he was talking about things that intuitively made sense to us. Self-government, responsibility, morality, balanced budgets. These were things that intuitively made sense to a family who lived paycheck to paycheck. We thought it made sense. My dad looked at me and said, "Son, we must be Republicans." And I said, "Yes, sir, it seems we are." And that day was my day to become a Republican. But now, watching how things have unfolded, particularly in my race, I've come to the uneasy conclusion that simply being a Republican is no longer enough. It's just not enough. You consider this for a moment. We have a Republican Party that's been governing like Democrats, have we not?
Yes.
Record debt, expansion of government, they have no respect for federalism. They compromise more than they fight. And it's particularly in my race, they will do anything and everything no matter how vicious, if it means beating a conservative.
Right.
Now, I don't know if you know the story about my race, but I think it does illustrate a split in our party. We said that's not a good thing. But no split ever is unless you find the true believers. We have to find the people that really believe as we do, don't we? There has to be a watershed moment where we can divide those that are just pretenders versus those that are really conservatives, right? I am tired of being told how conservative people are. We elect them, then they go to Washington and they cave every single day. I'm tired of watching that. Compromise in this environment is a dirty word.
Amen.
I want to be very clear about that. How much more do we have to compromise, conservatives? We have an $18 trillion debt, a constitution that's in chaos, our civil liberties that are retreating, and a government that can't seem to find its moral compass. What's left for us to surrender? I'm tired of bipartisanship. It's time to stand strong. The liberals haven't tried to work with us, have they? I mean, tell me what the bipartisanship was with Obamacare. They rammed that down our throats, didn't they? All of us were kicked back, compromises.
They were in another room.
Yeah, you got it. The Republicans did everything in their power to work with the Democrats, and the Democrats said, "No, thank you, we've got the numbers. We're going to win." At least they showed us what courage looked like. We didn't agree with it, but at least we now know what courage looks like. The Republicans can't seem to find their courage. And we're here to remind them that they work for us, not the other way around. I was a Republican since I was 13. I worked in the party. I fought the candidates. I gave money. I went door to door. I did everything a responsible, good Republican was supposed to do. I ran for the state Senate. I won. I ran again. I won. And I fought the entire time for limited government and conservatism with every vote that I cast. So much so that they called me a rising star in the party. They all wrote about me in these glowing terms. They sent me these wonderful emails behind the scenes and text messages I was really, really proud to receive. And then I managed one day to make the greatest mistake thinking perhaps of my life. I don't think so. I announced a primary race against Thad Cochran. Now you may say, who is Thad Cochran? You know, that's a good question. You should ask that because everybody in Mississippi knows who Ted Cruz is. Nobody knows who Senator Cochran is.
I've got one of his signs. I stole it.
Okay, you stole it from him. They stole plenty of ours too. Here's the thing. Senator Cochran has been there 41 years in Washington, D.C. Lifetime politician. Even the American Conservative Union, who endorses every incumbent every time, refused to endorse that Cochran. They endorsed me instead. His lifetime ACU score was right about a 53-54, putting him roughly above Senator Collins from Maine. In other words, he's the second most liberal Republican in the United States Senate, and he's from the most conservative state in the country. So we decided, let's test this theory about Mississippi being the most conservative state. Let's test the theory of how wonderful our Republican colleagues think I am. Let's create a watershed moment for the country. Let's create a watershed moment for Mississippi. Haley Barbour had told me a dozen occasions that party primaries are a good thing. That party primaries force us to think, they force us to raise money, they force us to act, they force us to be consistent. He told me a dozen times we should encourage party primaries. And then I ran against that guy. Now, that's when we begin to see the two sides of the party. Because all of those people that were my friends now, they weren't my friends. And they weren't defending conservatism, they were defending the status quo. Senator Cochran is the biggest spender in Washington, D.C. Did you know that? You didn't know that, did you? No. The biggest porker in all of Washington, D.C. I wasn't going to do this, but I've got to show you what motivated me to jump in this race just for a second. Now listen to this for a moment. Senator Cochran, he voted to fund Obamacare twice. He's voted for taxpayer-funded abortions. He's voted for stem cell research being paid for federal taxpayer dollars. He voted to bail out Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Over the past 13 years, he voted to increase the debt ceiling 10 times to the tune of $7.2 trillion. He's voted for higher income taxes, higher gas taxes, higher internet taxes, and even for George W. Bush's read my lips, no new taxes plans. He helped violate that. He's voted for increased gun control. He's voted every time to increase his own pay. And when that vote finally came in 2010 to ban earmarks, he did everything in his power not to ban earmarks. In every definition, fiscally, socially, and culturally, Dad Cochran is not a Republican. The people of Mississippi knew it intuitively, and the Republicans in Mississippi know it intuitively. It's just they don't care because Haley Barbour needs Dan Cochran in that position. So here's what happened. We fight for 6 or 7 long months. We have folks come from all over the country. Millions of dollars thrown into the race from both sides. And for the first time in Senator Cochran's career, and for the first time a 41-year incumbent had ever been challenged in a primary, we beat him. You understand? They told us it was impossible. They told us he was the most unbeatable politician in the country. His favorabilities, when we announced, were at 88% in Mississippi. The most popular guy around, 30 buildings named after him. You know, I gave a speech one night in the Bad Cochran Center. You ever consider that? I gave a speech in the Bad Cochran Center. But our fight was not with Thad Cochran. It was with the philosophy of government that underpins Thad Cochran's foundation. He can call himself a Republican all he wishes, but if he's voting to grow the size and scope of government, he is not a conservative. He can call himself a fiscal conservative all he wishes, but if he's the biggest earmarker in Washington, D.C., he is not a fiscal hawk. We wanted to point out those contradictions, and we did. And the first night, June the 3rd, in front of the whole country, we beat him. And here's the problem. In Mississippi, you have to get 50% plus 1. That is 50% plus 1 vote. We came just a couple of hundred votes short, which forced the race into a runoff. We've been there 41 years. The runoff time came. Do you know in a single night in Washington, D.C., just a couple of days after that vote, in 1.5 hour period, they raised $1 million with that kind. Do you know who led the charge to help him? Mitch McConnell.
And according to our...
So they raised all of this money. Oh, guess who gave him $300,000 for his super PAC to attack me? Who's the gun control mayor of New York? Bloomberg gave him $300,000. This was your Republican Party on display. This was the Haley Barbour corporate Republican blue blood establishment party on display. They took money from everybody they could, liberal, friend, and foe alike, and then they did the ultimate betrayal. Did you watch how we lost the race? Anybody see it? 3 weeks to win, and we actually increase our vote totals. On the night of the primary runoff night, we received over 180,000 votes. That is a record for Republicans in the state of Mississippi. Nobody's ever gotten that many. And Cochran received a few more than us based on the support of 50,000 Democrats. And what they did, they went to the African American communities and they issued these terrible, horrible things about the Tea Party and about me. They said I was a racist. They said if I was elected, I was going to cut off food stamps for everybody. They said if I was elected, I was going to make sure that African Americans could not vote in this country. They said if I was elected, Mississippi would return to the bad old days. And they put that out on black radio stations, they put that out in flyers, and they pushed 50,000 Democrats into a Republican primary. That's what's wrong with the party.
Yes, it is.
Now consider this. All these conservatives in Mississippi, all of those men that are my friends, do you know not a one condemned that action? Why? It is perfectly acceptable to be a friend of Thad Cochran's. It is perfectly acceptable to vote for Thad Cochran. He may have given your wife a job, your son a job, whatever the case may be. You may be his longtime friend, but you cannot forgive race baiting in politics. And you cannot forgive party raiding in politics. Do you know only 2 senators in the country spoke out against it? Ted Cruz was one. Thank God for Ted Cruz. And Mike Lee was the other in Utah. But it shows that division that I'm here to talk about tonight. I am a proud Republican, but I'm here to tell you the party as aligned right now is not the party as it should be. It's not being driven by what I call Goldwater Republicans. The Rockefeller wing's taken over. And Haley Barber's the head of that wing. And they did whatever they had to do to defeat us in Mississippi. But I want to be very clear about this. They know what they had to do. They weren't born yesterday. They know they had to put 50,000 Democrats into that primary to defeat a conservative, and that's the point. If you will organize and you will find, there's nothing the establishment can do to stop you.
Look at Ted Cruz.
Look at Ted
This
Cruz.
state was all for somebody
That's
else.
right. That's right. Now, and they're going to come after Cruz with everything they've got. And they're going to come after Lee with everything that they've got, just like they came after me. But there are more of us than there are of them. Here are the numbers. On the night of the runoff, thank you for your help, by the way.
You're welcome.
Do you know we received 60% of the Republican vote in the state? And still lost. We ran as an unabashed, unashamed conservative. And we won. I want to be clear about this, Republicans. Don't run moderates and expect to win elections. We've had enough. We've had enough John McCain's. We've had enough Bob Dole's. We've had enough Bushes, with all due respect. And I realize he's a son of Texas, or one of them is, or 2 of them are. But it changes nothing. The reality is, we don't do the political aristocracy in this country, is the first thing. The second of all is, we've had enough of that watered-down conservatism. Change is only going to come when we entrust our affairs to men and women who will actually go to Washington, D.C. and divest themselves of the powers they've been given. When you elect those people that will turn those powers back over to you and back over to the states, you will see reform in this country. And that's what it's going to take. And we conservatives, we're not here to streamline government. You ever heard a politician say that? Yeah. I'm going to streamline government. I don't want to streamline it. I want to reduce its size. You see, we're not here to promote government welfare because we're here to extend liberty and freedom. We don't want to pass a bunch of new laws. We want to repeal laws that do violence to the Constitution. This is an easy calculation, and we're not here to implement new programs, are we? Just do the right thing. And it's going to take people like you to do it, because most Americans don't seem to be paying attention right now. So my challenge to you is this, before I get to your questions. I have 2 young sons at home. One's 8 and one's 3. I don't have the benefit to look at things in 4-year terms or 6-year terms. I'm looking at things in 20-year terms at this point. If we don't control the present trajectory of this country, we are going to lose this country.
Amen.
I can't sleep knowing that we could lose this country and that my children would not inherit the country that I inherited. We've already lost far too much. I am not going to tell my kids one day about a once great republic that we could not save. And that's why we still fight. That's why we fight in the Mississippi Senate. But we need your help. Will you be men and women of courage? Courage means something. When you stand up to your enemies, they're going to attack, aren't they? If they're not attacking you, I'll suggest they don't fear you. When you're being attacked and ridiculed, that at least means they respect you and fear you. But you can't run away from the criticism. You have to stand with your chest out and speak truth to power, wherever that power may be. That takes courage. Number 2, will you be men and women of judgment? Going back to the kids that I have. The decisions you make tonight will invariably impact the lives of your children and mine. We don't live in a vacuum. Texas may be 2 states away, but the impact that you've given us with someone like Ted Cruz resonates across the country. The impact that you have in your communities resonates across the country. If we're going to rebuild this country, we have to have fertile soil to plant our foundation. Texas and Mississippi and Alabama have that fertile soil. Now's the time to resurrect it. Judgment. 3rd, integrity. Will you be men and women of integrity? And this does not mean perfect. We are all flawed. I'm just a sinner saved by grace. That's all I am. We are all flawed. But we recognize that we still have to fight next to our friends, even though sometimes we may disagree with their approaches or even with their opinions. You see, right now, we tend to fight about the smallest of issues, don't we? I have seen churches in my community break up over the color of the carpet on the floor. We have a republic to save. We should be able to at least agree to focus on the big picture and move forward together. And lastly, this is the hardest part for conservatives, hardest part for my generation. I grew up in an age of instant everything. Think about it. I want to watch TV, I push a couple of buttons, I watch the movie I want to watch. I want to cook something on the microwave, I cook it. It's ready in 2 or 3 minutes. Instant gratification, right? This fight is not going to be won today or tomorrow. And that hurts our feelings sometimes. How many times have you seen these great mass movements of conservatives come to the forefront to fight? They don't immediately see the solution, and then they go home and quit.
Yeah.
It's human nature. We want things right now. That's the 4th point. Will you be men and women of dedication? It took the left roughly 60 years to get us to this point. Did you know that? Waves against the shore, waves against the shore, and they eroded our very foundations. We have to begin to rebuild the foundations and then push back. It's going to take time. Don't be impatient. Just be strong with courage. And here's the deal. Have you ever heard the old term that politics is like a pendulum? And the clock goes to the right, and then it goes back to the left. And it goes to the right, and it goes back to the left. We have to reject that old way of thinking. And here's why. The entire clock for 40 years has been going to the left. And so every time the pendulum came back to the right, it was never back as far as it once was. And they redefined what it meant to be mainstream, what it meant to be normal. That's what they did. Our founders, I contend, were perfectly normal. Our founders are still perfectly mainstream. It doesn't matter what CNN says. It doesn't matter what Rachel Maddow says. What matters, more importantly, is what the Constitution says. That's our roadmap. That's our roadmap. You follow that document, you find success. Every time. And that's the question. We have to find success. We still have an opportunity here. As long as there are free men and women willing to sacrifice, we always have hope. We always have hope. Reagan used to talk about it being our rendezvous with destiny, remember? We will preserve the last and best hope for mankind. I still believe in it. And we better get busy, because if we lose here, where will free men and women go? This is the last great stand. Texas, Mississippi, and Alabama are the pillars of that last great stand for conservatism. We're not going to lead this charge from Massachusetts. You're not going to lead this charge from California or Maine or Connecticut. It has to come from here. It has to come from Mississippi. It has to come from the Deep South. Because we're still those people that every so often are just stubborn enough to recognize that we can self-govern ourselves. Thank you very much. No, we're not perfect. Yes,